Welcome to Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Kelly. It has been a fantastic week in the sports world. You have had baseball with the playoffs getting closer and closer and closer. You have some epic battles in the division. NL East, for example, is heating up. AL East is getting closer and closer. You are seeing in Major League Baseball Albert Pujols trying to get to 700, Aaron Judge trying to get to 60, Shohei Ohtani becoming the first player in MLB history to get 30 home runs and 10 wins in a single season. In the NBA world, we all heard about the Donovan Mitchell going to Cleveland. The Utah Jazz playing chess, not checkers. Danny Ainge doing to the Utah Jazz what he did to the Boston Celtics years and years ago. You're also seeing in the NFL, it is a week and a half away from the 2022 NFL season being kicked off. It is going to be a night that's going to be remembered. You got the Buffalo Bills, you got the Los Angeles Rams. There is so much talent on both of those teams for kickoff night in the NFL. It's going to be fantastic to watch. You also are going to have college football. Week 1 is finally here for 2022. NHL, you have less than a month away from training camp and all the stuff going on in the NHL right now. You've had some signings. There was a trade that happened between two teams in the Western Conference. We will talk about it more in detail in the second hour of the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio. But for this show tonight, we got to focus on Las Vegas. For episode 24 of the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the Las Vegas Raiders, their final roster, 53-man roster, it's been revealed. They have announced who is going to be on the roster, who is going to be in a place with the Las Vegas Raiders for 2022. What we're going to do on this show tonight is we're going to focus on Las Vegas. We're going to focus on Raiders. Later in the show, we'll focus on the Golden Knights. Because the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio is broadcasted in Las Vegas, Nevada. It's broadcasted in the sports capital of the world, the sports book capital of the world, the sports entertainment capital of the world. So with the Las Vegas Raiders having their 53-man roster being revealed heading into their Week 1 matchup, we will break it down here on the Sports Angle. We got to start with the most important position, and that is the quarterback. We have to start with the position that you either live or die by. So understand that when it comes to the Las Vegas Raiders, the quarterback position, you have Derek Carr as your starting QB. Now, this was expected. It's not a shocker that Derek Carr is the starting quarterback heading into 2022. What's a little bit shocking is that there isn't 3 quarterbacks. There's not 4 quarterbacks. There's only 2 quarterbacks on the roster. The Las Vegas Raiders and Josh McDaniels have done this strategy that was done in New England before, where you only have a starting quarterback, a backup quarterback, and then you have your wide receiver as your third quarterback. Now, Jarrett Stidham, they brought him over from New England. They brought him over because he's familiar with Josh McDaniels. He's familiar with the Josh McDaniels system. I also understand that when it comes to Jarrett Stidham, he will be a solid backup quarterback to Derek Carr. And as long as Jarrett Stidham does his job, they should be fine in Las Vegas. As long as Derek Carr plays the 17 games, as long as Jarrett Stidham holds the clipboard, The Las Vegas Raiders at quarterback, I give them a 4-star rating. 4 stars out of 5. All right. Out of 5 stars, I give them 4 stars. They've done pretty well. The running back position, they're going to have 6 heading into this year. Not only are they going to have their starting running back in Josh Jacobs, the former 2019 first-round pick, not only will the Las Vegas Raiders have some stability in special teams with Brandon Bolden, who also came over from New England. You're going to notice a trend here. But they've also kept the 2 rookies in Zamir White and Britton Brown. They have kept 2 rookie running backs for the Las Vegas Raiders. What that tells your host, Ian Rakelli, and what that should tell everyone right now is that Josh Jacobs is on his way out. Josh Jacobs is going to be done after 2022. The fact that Josh McDaniels and Dave Ziegler have kept both Zamir White and Britton Brown tells me that the Raiders are focused on the young, up-and-coming, fresh, hungry running backs. They also have a fullback as well in Jacob Johnson. Jacob Johnson will be the fullback for them. He's going to be a solid fullback. They're not going to ask for much. Similar to Alec Ingold a couple of years ago, the Las Vegas Raiders, outside of a few passing plays and a lot of blocking options, you're not going to really hear much about Jacob Johnson. So quarterback position, I gave them 4 out of 5 stars. When it comes to running backs, when it comes to Las Vegas, I give them 5 stars out of 5. I'm very pleased with what they've done in terms of depth. Having a veteran, an Amir Abdullah, having Josh Jacobs be your starting running back, and then having some stability by having 2 young up-and-coming rookies in Zamir White and Britton Brown will be fantastic for Las Vegas. They've also announced that they're going to have 5 wide receivers that are going to be at the helm for Las Vegas. Now, Davante Adams is a superstar. He is the guy who is going to be the it factor for Las Vegas. Davante Adams is going to be Derek Carr's it factor, his go route, his go-to guy. Derek Carr and Davante Adams played at Fresno State. They're familiar as teammates. It should be a comfortable transition for Davante Adams. And the fact that he has been the best wide receiver in the NFL for the past 2 seasons, that gets you 3 stars right there. Hunter Renfrow, the Pro Bowl wide receiver, he's really going to be your number 2 out here in Las Vegas. And Hunter Renfrow is a solid wide receiver. He's been a slot receiver for the last couple of years. Then bringing in Mac Hollins from the Miami Dolphins brings some stability. And then having Tyron Johnson and DJ Turner. I will point out that when it comes to Tyron Johnson and when it comes to DJ Turner, a lot of them are for depth. Keenan Cole, the veteran wide receiver, he was let go. Byron Edwards, he was let go. The Las Vegas Raiders made some very impactful moves at the wide receiver position, and having DJ Johnson and having Turner be part of the organization, I look at that and I go, Tyron Johnson and DJ Turner are going to be solid players to come off the bench in Las Vegas. So when it comes to their wide receivers for the Las Vegas Raiders, I give them 4 stars out of 5. Davante Adams gives them 3 stars automatically. Hunter Renfrow, I'd give him 1 extra star. But after those 2, it's kind of thin in terms of star power, in terms of quality. It's mainly about quantity with the remaining ones. Tight end position when it comes to the Las Vegas Raiders, and really a surprising move, the Las Vegas Raiders have kept not 2, but 3 tight ends. You know about Darren Waller. He's a top 5 tight end in the NFL. They've brought back Foster Moreau, who they drafted a couple of years ago, and they've brought over Jesper Horsted from the Chicago Bears. They brought him in to compete with Jacob Holster. Jacob Holster was put on season-ending IR, so Horsted got the spot. Now, the tight end position is interesting because of how many options the Raiders could have here. You could have a 3 tight end system and have one wide receiver on the outside. You could use a tight end and have him be a fullback on certain plays. You could have 6 offensive linemen and have one of them count as a tight end if you wanted to. So when it comes to the Las Vegas Raiders having a trio in terms of options at tight end, that is going to be solid for them down the line. It is going to be a benefactor, not a negative, for the Las Vegas Raiders to have a trio of tight ends in Las Vegas. Having Darren Waller is definitely a positive, and also bringing in stability with Moreau and Horsted. So I would give them 4 stars out of 5. The Las Vegas Raiders at a tight end position, I give them 4 out of 5 because they have brought some stability and they brought some reliability to the organization. Now, the offensive line. This is where Raiders fans, you've been happy with me for the last 5 minutes. You're going to hate me now. For the offensive line, they have kept 8 offensive linemen. That means that they are going to have 5 starters and 3 backups. The Las Vegas Raiders are going to have 5 starting offensive linemen and having only 3 coming off the bench. Also understand this is the Las Vegas Raiders who released first-round pick Alex Leatherwood and former Bears offensive lineman Alex Bars during the offseason. So when it comes to Las Vegas Raiders, apprehend that they have sacrificed so much of their offensive line that it is bare to none. Now, that offensive line in terms of depth is non-existent. There pretty much isn't anything you can talk about when it comes to their offensive line. So when it comes to their offensive tackles, they have 4. They have Colton Miller, Jackson Barton, Jermaine Eleanor, and their rookie, Thayer Munford Jr. Now, here's my main problem with having 4 tackles. Is that you have 4 tackles on the team, including Jackson Barton, who came from University of Utah. I know exactly who he is. He's 27 years old. He's been in the NFL for about 4 years now. That's not the problem. The problem is that you have a very young and a very inexperienced offensive line. Understand that the oldest offensive lineman they have on this team is a 27-year-old. Okay, comprehend that having Andre James, John Simpson, the rookie Dylan Parham, having Lester Cotton, you have a very bare-boned offensive line in Las Vegas. Derek Carr is going to be running for his life on every single play. Josh Jacobs is going to be put in the backfield on almost every single play because you have no veteran leadership. You have no veteran stability on that offensive line. You do not have someone on that roster that you can look at and say, you know what? You've been here for X amount of years. You've been in the locker room. You know what you need to do. So let's just go out and do it. That is my problem with the Las Vegas Raiders, is that everybody in that locker room is from 2019, 2020, 2021, and 2022. And when you've seen young and inexperienced offensive lines in the past, they make mistakes. And oh boy, they make a lot of mistakes. So when it comes to the offensive line, their starting lineup right now of Colton Miller at left tackle, John Simpson at left guard, Andre James at center, Lester Cotton at right guard, and Jermaine Eleanor at right tackle. I give it 1 star out of 5. And if it wasn't for Colton Miller, to be blunt, it would be half a star out of 5. This is by far a bottom 5 offensive line in the NFL. It's very bleak. It's very bland. And there really isn't much positive going on with the offensive line in Las Vegas. They are going to have to really show me something before I give them any positive feedback for 2022. You have 2 rookies like Parham and Munford. Hopefully they can get some playing time. Jackson Barton coming from University of Utah, Maybe he can start at right tackle at some point during the year. But outside of Colton Miller, I don't have much positive to say about the offensive line in Las Vegas. 1 star out of 5 when it comes to the offensive line in Las Vegas. Absolutely bad. Now, the defensive line, the front four for Las Vegas, is locked and loaded, and it is deep in terms of depth. They have 11 players in terms of depth for the offensive line. So, of course, you're going to have your starters. You're going to have your front four and Max Crosby, Chandler Jones, Jonathan Hankins, and Bail Nichols, who, by the way, came over from Chicago. Max Crosby, Pro Bowler. Chandler Jones, Pro Bowler. But my biggest problem is what you have afterwards. Because you have 2 rookies and Butler and Farrell. You have guys like Bauer and Knut who will be able to bring some young stability to the Las Vegas Raiders defensive ends. Now, here's where my biggest problem lies, and it's a kind of bit of a minor concern, is you have all of these defensive ends, you have all of these defensive linemen, but because you have 11 defensive ends and you have 11 defensive linemen, that makes a very bland and a very strapped secondary. As a matter of fact, their secondary only has a select few amount of people in there. If I remember correctly, I think they have less than 5 defensive backs when it comes to the Las Vegas Raiders. So you have stacked the box and you have 11 defensive linemen, but you sacrificed it by having a very select few when it comes to your defensive backs. So in terms of depth, defensive line, I give it 5 out of 5 for Las Vegas. But in terms of what they had to sacrifice in order to get those 11 defensive linemen, that's why I would give them 1 star off. That's why I would say in terms of roster construction, I would give it 2 out of 5. When it comes to depth, I would give it 5 out of 5. Because I do like the decisions that they've made, but it's made their defensive backs, it's made their secondary very strapped, very bleak. No, actually, a bland offensive line is not good. When you have a bland offensive line, it's not good for your team. If you need an example, let's look at the Cincinnati Bengals last year. Their offensive line nearly cost Joe Burrow another season. That offensive line cost Joe Burrow a Super Bowl win. Make no mistake about it, if he had half a second more, he would have seen Jamar Chase wide open, and he would have been able to connect. How about the Pittsburgh Steelers during the Ben Roethlisberger era the last couple of years? A very bad offensive line. Having a very bland and a very boring offensive line is not good for the NFL. Having an offensive line that only has eight offensive linemen on it is unfortunate. So defensive linemen, like I said, in terms of depth, I would give it a 5 out of 5. I like to see that the 2 rookies got on the roster. They have 5 linebackers on the team. You're going to have Denzel Perryman, Jayon Brown, and Divine Diablo. And then you're going to have Luke Masterson and Darian Butler. So Darian Butler and Luke Masterson, they earned their way onto the team. They did well in the preseason, so they earned their shot. They also, having Diablo and Perryman, have committed, and I mean really have committed, to making it a 4-3 system. So them having Diablo, Perryman, and Brown as your linebackers for the Las Vegas Raiders, I will give it a 4 out of 5 because I do like the construction of the linebacking core. I think the Las Vegas Raiders have some potential there. Defensive backs, man, I really got to be the bad guy here. In terms of your defensive backs, you have right now Nate Hobbs a 5th-round pick from last year as your number 1 corner. You have Rock Ya-Sin, a guy who struggled in Indianapolis, as your number 2. You have Amik Robertson, who was drafted by the Raiders in 2020, a guy who, a lot of teams probably would have cut by now, as your 3rd slot corner. And then you have Anthony Everett, who you got from Baltimore. He wasn't even good enough to be in the starting lineup. And then you get a rookie in Sam Webb, who was a free agent. You didn't even draft the guy. So you traded Trayvon Mullins. You let go of Darius Phillips. We know about what happened with Damian Arnett. We don't even got to go there. The defensive backs are going to be lit up in Las Vegas. Nate Hobbs and Rock Ya-Sin and Amik Robertson are going to be exposed in 2022. Why do I say this? Because they're going to have to go up against Keenan Allen twice a year. They're going to have to go up against Cortland Sutton and Jerry Jeudy twice a year. This is a very bad defensive back core. There really isn't much depth. Like I said, there's only 5 defensive backs. That's a concern when it comes to an NFL team. You have no all-star caliber. There's no all-pros. There's no Pro Bowlers. There really isn't anybody who's had longevity with Las Vegas. So like I said, they have Nate Hobbs from last year, Amik Robertson from 2020, Sam Webb from 2022, and then they brought in 2 guys from free agency that really haven't been starting corners in the NFL up to this point. So, similar to the offensive line, you have found the crutch for Las Vegas. On offense, their offensive line is their anchor. On defense, their defensive backs are their anchor. Understand that when it comes to the Las Vegas Raiders, they are going to be exposed like toast. They're going to be burnt like toast when it comes to 2022 because you're going to have to go up against Keenan Allen, going to go up against Mike Williams, go up against Juju Smith-Schuster, go up against Marquez Valdes-Scantling. The Las Vegas Raiders defensive backs are going to be worn out by the end of the year. Halfway through the season, they are going to have a lack of confidence from the amount of times they're going to get burnt in 2022. So when it comes to defensive backs, this is a very obvious and actually very easy one to say. I give it a 1 out of 5 stars when it comes to their defensive backs. Now, their safety position, you have Trayvon Mooring and Jonathan Abram as your starters. Jonathan Abram, your 1st-round pick in 2019, and Trayvon Mooring, your 2nd-round pick last year. You also have Darian Harmon, who they brought over, from the New England Patriots system. You have Roderick Teamer, who they drafted last year. And you have the rookie Isaiah Pola Mayau. The former USC Trojan made the roster in 2022. They also had to beat out Matthias Farley for that spot as well. When it comes to the Las Vegas Raiders, their safety position, I'll be a little bit nicer on. I will give their safety position 5 out of 5 stars when it comes to potential. When it comes to potential, their safeties have a 5 stars out of 5. But in terms of what I think they're going to do, in terms of how I believe they're going to perform this year, I have to give them 1 out of 5. Because understand that, once again, their safeties are only going to be as good as their defensive backs. The safeties are only going to be able to do as much coverage as they can if you have their secondaries who haven't been burnt after 5 yards down the field. Your safeties are only going to be able to do as much relief as they can as long as the corner does his job properly. So, in terms of potential, I like Mooring. I think, Harmon coming over from New England, that's a solid move. Teamer, he came over from last year and the college free agent last year. And then Pola Mayau, who was a college free agent last year, they got him as well. And then special teams for Las Vegas. Now, Las Vegas, when it comes to special teams, they have one of the best. AJ Cole, solid punter. Dylan Carlson, one of the best kickers in the NFL. And then Trent Sieg is their long snapper. He's been there since 2018. Now, I'll give it 4 out of 5 stars. I don't think that any special teams is perfect in the NFL. Otherwise, they would just win the Super Bowl by themselves. So I will say 4 out of 5 stars. They are one of the best special team specialists in the NFL today. So to recap what I've been saying about the Las Vegas Raiders, when it comes to his safety, when it comes to the position breakdown for 2022, for quarterbacks with Derek Carr and Jarrett Stidham, I give them 4 out of 5 stars. In terms of running backs, I give them 5 out of 5 stars. I'm very big on the depth of Las Vegas. I think it's going to help them a lot. Wide receivers, I give them 4 out of 5 stars. Having the best wide receiver in the NFL and having a guy like Hunter Renfrow is going to be essential. At tight end, I'll give them 4 out of 5 stars. Them having Horsted, Waller, and Moreau are going to add stability and add depth to the tight end position. Offensive line, 1 out of 5 stars. 1 for Colton Miller. It'd be half of a star out of 5. The offensive line is going to be having Derek Carr run for his life. That offensive line is going to take years off of Derek Carr. You really don't have much depth, and you don't really have much in terms of veteran leadership on offensive line. Now, defensive linemen, I got to give them 5 out of 5. I like what they've done on defense, them having a bunch of guys on defense. My only constructive criticism would be that they've made their secondary thin by having 11 people on their defensive line. Linebackers, I give them 4 out of 5 stars. Denzel Perryman, Jayon Brown, Divine Diablo, and the 2 rookies they have on there will be able to add some stability to the linebacking core. Defensive backs with Nate Hobbs, Rocky Sin, Amik Robertson, Anthony Everett, and Sam Webb, I give them 1 out of 5 stars. They are going to be the weakest link on defense for Las Vegas. They're going to get exposed in the AFC West with all of the weapons that are in the AFC West and all the weapons that are in the AFC. The secondary is going to be exposed in Las Vegas. And then their safeties, I will give them 5 out of 5 for potential. I like Mooring. I like Toomer. And I think Masulu is going to be a solid safety in the NFL. And then second, special teams, I give them 4 out of 5. One of the best special teams in terms of the NFL today. Well, here's my problem. You do not need a team of megastars. I never said that. But you need a team with players who are starting caliber. You need guys who are going to be able to start every single time. And unfortunately, their offensive line and their defensive backs do not have any veterans in the locker room that they can rely on. They do not have that 32-year-old, that 34-year-old that can sit there and say, you know what? I've been here for 9 years. I know what I'm doing. Hey, you're a rookie. Follow my lead, and we'll get this job done. Or you'll have this 11-year veteran who's been there and done that. He's won a Super Bowl. He's been to playoff games. At this point, he just wants to go out in the field and just show that he still got it. The Las Vegas Raiders don't have that. They have a bunch of young, up-and-coming guys who do not have any veteran leadership in their corner. I mean, the wide receivers, Devontae Adams has been there for almost a decade. He would bring that veteran leadership to the young guys in Johnson and Turner. When it comes to running backs, Brandon Bolden has been in the NFL locker room. He's been in New England. He knows Josh McDaniels. He can help Samir White and Britton Brown. When it comes to quarterbacks, Derek Carr has been here for almost a decade. Jarrett Stidham knows Josh McDaniels' role. He knows Josh McDaniels' system. He will be able to contribute. The offensive line does not have that. They do not have somebody from New England. Las Vegas does not have any offensive linemen over the age of 27, which is kind of alarming to me. And the Las Vegas Raiders have a bunch of guys from 2019 and onwards instead of 2018 and backwards. Understand that they brought in Chandler Jones on the defensive line because he would be able to help out the young guys. At the linebacking core, they brought in Denzel Perryman because he's a veteran. He knows how it's done. In terms of the safety position, they brought in Darren Harmon because he's a former Patriot. He knows their system. The Las Vegas Raiders do not have that in their secondary. They do not have that in their offensive line, their meat wall. They do not have someone in the locker room they can turn to for guidance. They really don't have someone that can be that veteran leader in the locker room. So that is our Las Vegas Raiders segment here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, breaking down the Las Vegas Raiders 53-man roster. And I will give you my general conclusion. I will give you what my overall star rating would be for the Las Vegas Raiders. I have the Las Vegas Raiders for 2022 at 3.5 stars. As a team, I have them at 3.5 stars. If it wasn't for their terrible offensive line and their abandoned secondary, they would be 4 stars, and it would be a very good playoff team. But because of their bearing defensive backs, because of their alarming lack of offensive line help, the Las Vegas Raiders, I have them at 3.5. They're going to be on the cusp of being a playoff team in 2022. You know what? You have them at 9-8. If anybody who saw my season preview show I did a while back, a couple episodes ago, I had them at 8-9. I had the Chargers at 9-8, the Broncos at 10-7, and the Chiefs at 7-10. And when it comes to Las Vegas, yeah, sure, you could give them a win. You could remove a win if you want. When it comes to the schedule of the Las Vegas Raiders, I say that 8-9 is pretty fair. It would be 8-8 if it was the old 16-game schedule, because the Las Vegas Raiders in 2022, I do not see them being a dominant playoff team. I don't see them being a terrible team. I have them as an above-average team in the NFL. I have the Las Vegas Raiders as around 500-like in the NFL. They're going to be on the same level as the Los Angeles Chargers. They're going to be on the same level as the Indianapolis Colts. They're going to be on the same level as the Pittsburgh Steelers. They're going to be on the same level as the Miami Dolphins. Understand that you have about 5 teams battling for the last playoff spot in the AFC. It's going to be tough. It's going to be a bloodbath. It is going to be a dogfight for that last spot in the AFC playoffs. And those 5 teams I mentioned, Miami, Pittsburgh, Indianapolis, LA, and LV, are all going to battle for that spot. So I say 8-9, 9-8, whichever route you want to go. But to me, the Raiders are an above average team in 2022. They're going to be battling for the last playoff spot heading into week 17, heading into week 18 of the NFL season. So transitioning from the Las Vegas Raiders, we're going to get into the sophomore season for the NFL. We're going to go over a few players from the 2021 NFL draft that I believe are going to be players you have to watch out for. There's a few players that I believe are going to make a big statement in their sophomore season in the NFL. The first player that I have is Justin Fields from the Chicago Bears. Chicago Bears quarterback Justin Fields he has something to prove. Justin Fields has a mission. He has an assignment that he is going to complete. Justin Fields entering year 2 of his NFL career. He has the talent. He has the ability. He's got to go out and get it done with the Chicago Bears when it comes to Justin Fields. And yes, I'm well aware that the offensive line is as burnt as a hockey puck. I understand that the wide receivers are very barren and it's going to be extremely empty. But when it comes to Justin Fields, I examine what he has, and I say that when it comes to Justin Fields, he will be able to conquer. He will be able to get it done. The second person that I have when it comes to the sophomore season in the NFL, the second player from the 2021 NFL draft that I believe is going to impress, is going to take over in 2022. I end up having Trey Lance, the quarterback from the San Francisco 49ers. Trey Lance is disrespected, undervalued, and really hasn't been given a chance in the NFL yet. Trey Lance is replacing Jimmy Garoppolo in San Francisco. He is going to be under center entering 2022. When it comes to Justin Fields, who has no offensive line, Trey Lance has the best offensive lineman in the NFL in Trent Williams. He has Mike McGlinchey. He has all of this offensive line in front of him in San Francisco. He has George Kittle at tight end. He's got the slot machine, Deebo Samuel at wide receiver. He has the options at running back. Trey Lance is going to benefit from the San Francisco 49ers. Unlike Justin Fields, who has no weapons, Trey Lance is going to have weapons galore. So I have Justin Fields as the first sophomore you have to watch out for. The second sophomore is Trey Lance from San Francisco. And my third is an offensive lineman. Because this offensive lineman is going to be one of the best all year. This offensive lineman, coming from Northwestern, by the way, this guy is going to take over the NFL. This offensive lineman from the Los Angeles Chargers is going to be an all-pro this season. I'm calling it right now. Rashawn Slater from the Los Angeles Chargers, the guy that I really wanted the Bears to draft before they took Justin Fields. I knew that when it came to Rashawn Slater, he was going to be a stud at the next level. I knew he had the talent to succeed in the NFL. And considering that he started every single game last year for the Los Angeles Chargers, that tells me they have confidence in him, and he's a starting offensive lineman heading into year 2. So the third player from the 2021 NFL draft you have to watch out for is offensive tackle Rashawn Slater. The fourth player from the 2021 NFL draft that you need to pay attention to is Indianapolis Colts defensive end Kwity Paye. Kwity Paye from Rhode Island, who played at University of Michigan. He was drafted in the first round by Indianapolis last year, had 4 sacks and 32 tackles in a uneventful but not bad rookie year. But with the Indianapolis Colts defense being one of the best heading into 2022, with Indianapolis having Darius Leonard, having DeForest Buckner, having this talent in Indianapolis that can benefit Kwity Paye, I've got a prediction that Kwity Paye could get maybe 8 sacks, 9 sacks this year. He'll have over 70 tackles, and he will have a great second year in Indianapolis. So my fourth player from 2021 you need to watch out for is Kwity Paye from Michigan. And the fifth and final player from the 2021 NFL draft that you need to keep an eye on is Cleveland Browns defensive back Greg Newsome II. Greg Newsome, he got drafted last year in the first round by the Cleveland Browns, and he wasn't bad. He wasn't a bad defensive back, but he wasn't shocking. He wasn't a shining bright light in the NFL. Year 2, I believe that's going to change. Year 2, Greg Newsome is going to be a good corner in the NFL. He is going to be what Denzel Ward was in 2019 for the Cleveland Browns. He is going to take a step up, and he is going to shine in Cleveland's defense. So, Greg Newsome from the Cleveland Browns at 5. Indianapolis Colts Kwity Paye at 4. The Los Angeles Chargers Rashawn Slater at 3. Trey Lance, the San Francisco 49ers at 2. And then the first player you need to watch out for is Justin Fields from the Chicago Bears. Let me know if you agree or disagree with that. I really want to hear your feedback. But yes, Justin Fields is the number one person you got to watch out for from last year's draft. He's going to be the number one guy heading into his sophomore year you need to pay attention to. Because Justin Fields has to make or break the Chicago Bears heading into 2023. He has to be the undisputed, undeterred number one quarterback in the Chicago Bears system with $100 million in cap space the next offseason. He's got to be the guy. You know, you think that the Raiders have a bad offensive line. The Bears have none. You know what? I think the Bears actually got better by bringing in Alex Leatherwood. I'll say it right here, right now. I think that Alex Leatherwood going to Chicago is going to benefit Alex Leatherwood. I will not be surprised if Alex Leatherwood becomes a solid tackle in Chicago. I would not be shocked if the Las Vegas Raiders fumbled the bag by letting him go, and then Alex Leatherwood will end up being a better tackle in Chicago than he was in Las Vegas. I won't be surprised. So I actually disagree. I think Las Vegas, with them letting go of Alex Bars, letting go of Alex Leatherwood, that they've actually gotten worse than the Chicago Bears have in terms of offensive line. Continuing with our NFL segment here on the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. Follow our social media at Sports Angle on PR. We are on all social media platforms. And follow your host at Ian Rakelli 18. That is IANRACHIELE 18. Also follow prconnectionsradio.com by going to their website, going on their social media at PR Connections Radio, or following all the shows that are programmed on here. You know, we have The Power with Brian Gardner. You have Aunt Shirley with her, creative tips and her advice. You have Sandra with Voices of Humanity. You have So You Want to Be a ... with Brian Gardner. You also have Cozy Stone, fantastic show. I highly recommend checking her out. And if there's anybody that I am forgetting from PR Connections Radio, I will apologize in advance. And then Guy Dawson, obviously, you bringing me on PR Connections Radio in the first place. Got to give a shout out to you as well. The NFL waiver wire. Now, the NFL waiver wire is interesting. Not only did the Tennessee Titans take advantage of it by claiming former All-Pro wide receiver Josh Gordon from the Kansas City Chiefs. Oh, yeah, by the way, Josh Gordon is gone from Kansas City as well, for anybody who's keeping track. So, Tennessee gets Josh Gordon. Alex Leatherwood goes to Las Vegas. There's been some solid moves on the waiver wire. David Below, the backup quarterback in Detroit, he is now the backup quarterback in Minnesota, going from one division rival to the next. So it's been interesting on the waiver wire to see who has gone where, but that's kind of a waiver wire update from the NFL. And I'm an odds guy. I like going to the sports book, especially if I get a chance to go to FanDuel. You know, if I can look at FanDuel and I can, check out what they got, yeah, I'm a big fan of it. I am a huge supporter of FanDuel. I recommend everybody go out and check FanDuel. They're pretty accurate. But their NFL odds for Super Bowl 57 is fascinating. Your host, Ian Rickelli. So the Buffalo Bills are the odds-on favorite at 6-1 to win the Super Bowl. Now, the Buffalo Bills being the odds-on favorite is not what surprises your host, Ian Rickelli. It's who's right beneath the Buffalo Bills. It is who's right under the Buffalo Bills that shocks your host, Ian Rickelli. The Kansas City Chiefs are 10-1. The Kansas City Chiefs are 10-1 to win the Super Bowl. Now, I don't know if I need to get closer for you to understand what I'm saying. I don't know if I need to get closer so you can hear me. But the Kansas City Chiefs should not be 10-1. The Kansas City Chiefs should not be the second odds-on favorite to win the Super Bowl. In my opinion, they are way, way too high. They're overhyped. They're overrated. And I will give you 5 reasons as to why. And I know there's somebody watching right now who is a Kansas City Chiefs fan. I know that she loves Patrick Mahomes. I know that she loves the Kansas City Chiefs. So as much as you don't want to hear this, I'm going to give it to you anyway. The 5 reasons why the 10-1 odds Kansas City Chiefs are overrated, overhyped. They have been way over spotlighted in the NFL. To be fair, they should not be the second highest odds-on favorite after the Buffalo Bills. Here's reason number 1. You have one of the weakest offensive lines in the NFL. Understand that the Kansas City Chiefs do not have the guy that they once did in Eric Fisher. They do not have the people that they once did in Laurent Duvaulois-Tardif. Understand that when it comes to the Kansas City Chiefs, they do not have the offensive line they once did. That offensive line that helped Patrick Mahomes clear up space. You do not have the big men, the meat wall, the big 300-pound guys in front of Patrick Mahomes. Your offensive line right now, outside of Orlando Brown, is a little bit questionable. So that's the first part. Second, you do not have Tyreek Hill anymore. You do not have Patrick Mahomes' safety blanket. You do not have Patrick Mahomes, you know what? Screw it. I'm just going to chuck it up and Tyreek Hill's going to go get it anyway. Or I'm going to do this no-look pass to Tyreek because I know he's going to be there. They replaced Tyreek Hill with Juju Smith-Schuster. I'm going to repeat that again for people who don't understand football. The Kansas City Chiefs replaced a all-pro, Pro Bowl wide receiver with Juju Smith-Schuster. The commercial, dancing on the sidelines, dancing on the halftime logo. The guy who does a bunch of TikToks, the guy who's going to annoy Patrick Mahomes, I guarantee it. You know, Juju Smith-Schuster is good for social media, but he is not Tyreek Hill. Juju Smith-Schuster is good to star in commercials, but he's not Tyreek Hill. Tyreek Hill is a one-of-a-kind guy. Tyreek Hill is a cheetah. And why is he called cheetah? Because he's super fast. He is too fast. Juju Smith-Schuster does not have the speed, does not have the route running, and does not have the agility that Tyreek Hill did. So you're Patrick Mahomes, the next time you're scrambling for your life, are you going to chuck it up to Juju Smith-Schuster? I don't know. Are you going to have confidence that next no-look pass is going to connect to Juju Smith-Schuster? No, you're not. Let's also mention that they lost Byron Pringle. They lost Sammy Watkins. They've lost Josh Gordon. In a span of a few months, their 4 best wide receivers are gone. Demarcus Robinson is gone. So the Kansas City Chiefs, in the span of one offseason, lost not one, not two, not a trio, not four, but five of your wide receivers that Patrick Mahomes relied on. Mecole Hardman is the only wide receiver returning from last year. So if you're Kansas City Chiefs, if you're Patrick Mahomes, you're going to have to adjust to your new wide receivers very quick. Third reason why the Kansas City Chiefs are overrated and overhyped, according to the NFL odds makers, according to FanDuel, the best sports book you can go to. Travis Kelce is going to be triple teamed all year long. Travis Kelce no longer has Tyreek Hill to get some leverage off of them. Travis Kelce didn't have to have the entire receiving core on his back anymore. Travis Kelce didn't have to have the burden of carrying a 250-pound boulder on his back every single game. Because once again, they had a cheetah in Tyreek Hill that could help him out. But now, Patrick Mahomes has Travis Kelce, and oh, did I mention Travis Kelce? I will not be surprised if the Kansas City Chiefs start getting triple teamed on every single play. I will not be shocked if you have your two linebackers and you have your safety triple teaming Travis Kelce and begging Patrick Mahomes to go toss it up to somebody else. I won't be surprised one bit. I mean, would you be shocked to have Tyreek Hill no longer there? Travis Kelce isn't being triple teamed? Because understand that for the last 5 years, the Chiefs have had a double team. They've had double coverage. They've had double trouble. But now the Chiefs have one team, have one coverage, have one option, and it's going to backfire in Kansas City. Do not expect a 1,500-yard season by Travis Kelce. Do not expect a double-digit touchdowns from Travis Kelce, because he is going to be slammed. He's going to be bodied. He's going to be taken down in triple coverage. He's going to be put into the box every single time because he's the only option, and the defenses know it. So if you're a Kansas City Chiefs fan, do not expect Travis Kelce to have 200 yards for 10 receptions and 4 touchdowns, because he's going to be triple teamed. He's going to have 2 people on him at all times. He is going to be put in a tight end spy. Understand that Travis Kelce is not going to be as dominant as he has been, because the Chiefs now have Travis Kelce, and Travis Kelce as Patrick Mahomes' only target. You no longer have Tyreek Hill. You no longer have Sammy Watkins. You no longer have Demarcus Robinson. You no longer have Josh Gordon for 2 games. And you no longer have Brian Pringle. You do not have a safety blanket. You do not have a security cushion for Patrick Mahomes anymore. It's just Travis Kelce go left, Travis Kelce go right, and Travis Kelce go middle, and hope that you can go and jump and get it. Reason number 4 the Chiefs are overrated right now is that their defense has been gutted and has been taken for a ride. Not only did the Kansas City Chiefs lose Tyrann Mathieu from last year, there's also the same Kansas City Chiefs that have lost Justin Houston. This is the same Kansas City Chiefs roster that lost some solid players coming off the defensive end that's going to hurt Kansas City in the long run. So you have a weakened defense. You have pretty much no weapons outside of Travis Kelce. You don't have Tyreek Hill anymore. And you have a very weakened offensive line. And to recap it and put it into a friendly little bow, Number 5, and the fifth and final reason why Chiefs are overrated and overhyped, their division has gotten tougher. Their division is the best in football. The Broncos got better. The Raiders got better. The Chargers got better. Each team in the AFC West got better, and Kansas City got worse. The Raiders gained Devontae Adams and Chandler Jones. Good move. The Chargers gained Khalil Mack and J.C. Jackson. Good move. The Denver Broncos getting, Broncos Nation. Let's ride. And Russell Wilson. Good move. And what happened to Kansas City? They lost 5 of their receivers. Their starting running backs went and retired. And their offensive line got weaker. So, for anybody who's putting that 10-1 odds on Kansas City, give me a logical explanation as to why they would be 10-1 without saying the word Patrick Mahomes. If it wasn't for Patrick Mahomes, they would not be 10-1. Without Patrick Mahomes, they would not be projected to win the AFC West. If not for Patrick Mahomes, they would not be projected to win 10 or more games in 2022. Patrick Mahomes is the sole reason why everybody has Kansas City better than they should be. Patrick Mahomes is the main reason why anybody is going to watch Kansas City this year. Because if Chad Henne was your quarterback, they would win 2 games all year. If Chad Henne was your quarterback, if Matt Moore was your quarterback, if Matt Castle was your quarterback, the Kansas City Chiefs would be going in the bottom 5 of the draft in 2023. But because the Kansas City Chiefs selected Patrick Mahomes, thanks to the Buffalo Bills for trading him, and thanks to the Chicago Bears for passing on him, they have a generational talent. Thanks to Buffalo and Chicago, Kansas City has their franchise quarterback. Thanks to Buffalo and Chicago, Kansas City has their diamond in the rough, their shining diamond in Patrick Mahomes. So for Kansas City fans, when I said 7-10, I meant 7-10. When I say that Patrick Mahomes is not your future, when I say that you are not going to be winning for much of your next couple of years, I mean it. Because Patrick Mahomes cannot carry the team by himself. Patrick Mahomes cannot carry an entire roster, an entire 53-man roster by himself. And this season, you're going to see what I'm talking about. This season, you are going to examine and you're going to analyze and understand that Ian Rakelli, the host of the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, was 1,000% correct. So we're talking about the NFL here on the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. I'm your host, Ian Rakelli. Follow me on social media at Ian Rakelli18. If you are on our YouTube channel, don't forget to like the video, hit the subscribe button, and turn on notification bells so you don't miss any future episode of the Sports Angle. To conclude our NFL segment with less than 2 minutes left, I want to very quickly promote the PR Connections. I want to promote everybody that works and everyone who contributes to PR Connections Radio. Not only does Guy Dawson do what he's doing, and that's bringing in a bunch of new content, bringing in a lot of people who are part of PR Connections, you also have a bunch of amazing content. I got to give a shout out to everybody who is part of PR Connections. It'd be unfair if I didn't. So Cozy Stone, I've been watching your show. Fantastic show that Cozy Stone is doing. She's interviewing parents. She's interviewing people who, have raised, these incredible daughters, incredible sons. And, when it comes to pay attention, when it comes to parents, I think it's an amazing show. So Cozy Stone, what she's doing on PR Connections is fantastic. What Sandra's doing when it comes to Voices of Humanity. And no, I'm not going to pronounce your last name because I'm 1,000% convinced I'm going to butcher it. But yeah, what you're doing and what you're doing for the community and what you're doing in terms of interviewing people and bringing people together is fantastic. So Sandra, shout to you. And I also got to mention Brian Gardner for So You Want to Be a ... He talks to people who are in the industry. He talks to leaders. He talks to entrepreneurs. He talks to people who understand and realize that their craft means something and they want you to realize that craft as well. And then lastly, I know that, the Cause Marketing Chamber of Commerce, I know they do their show probably once a month. Got to give them a shout out as well because they are part of PR Connections alongside Aunt Shirley as well. Man, Aunt Shirley, what she's been doing is incredible as well. So this is the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. And man, it is time to get into the hockey world. You have less than 1 month until the NHL season kicks off. And I'm willing to bet that there's a lot of teams that are on the rise. There is a lot of teams that are going to have potential in 2022. Only one team, however, has my attention. Only one team has my eye on their potential for this upcoming year. The Anaheim Ducks, the Mighty Ducks of Anaheim, they are going to be my team to focus on. And my prediction, the Anaheim Ducks are going to make the playoffs in 2022. I will give you my explanation and I will explain to you why the Anaheim Ducks will make the playoffs in 2022. For starters, their youth movement has taken off. Their youth movement has finally connected. Not only are they going to have guys like Maxime Comtois, Isaac Lundstrom, you have Troy Terry, Max Jones, the most popular player in hockey, and Trevor Zegras. Congrats on being on the cover of the NHL video game, by the way. You have the World Junior Championship hero for Team Canada, and that's Mason McTavish. I just named 6 players that are part of the youth movement in Anaheim. Understand that when it comes to the Anaheim Ducks, they have one of the youngest rosters in the NHL right now. The Anaheim Ducks have this overload of talent that's in the wings. And I want you to comprehend something. The Anaheim Ducks, with Trevor Zegras, with Troy Terry, with Maxime Comtois, with them bringing in some young veterans and Ryan Strome and Mark Vetrano, they are building a winning team in Anaheim. They are building a team that, by the way, their first line combined for over 70 goals last season. Zegras, Terry, and Henrique combined for over 70 goals on their first line at Anaheim. So your offense has been well established in Anaheim. Your defense is getting better. Not only do you have stability in terms of veterans by bringing in Kevin Shattenkirk, having John Klingberg, and having Cam Fowler, so you have a trio of veterans who have been there for a long time. But you have 20-year-old up-and-coming, former top 10 pick in Jamie Drysdale. You also have a young 23-year-old in Simon Benoit, who is going to be in the ranks. You also have somebody like, for example, Owen Zellweger. You have Drew Helson. You have Axel Anderson, a trio of young defensemen who are 22, 21, and 18 years old, respectively, they're going to be in the NHL at some point this year. So your defense is getting younger, and they are going to be improved. Your offense is getting younger, and they have been improved. And then your goaltending with John Gibson is one of the best in hockey. John Gibson, at 29 years old, has shown that if you give him a team in front of him, he can get you to the playoffs. John Gibson has shown that if the Anaheim Ducks build a team, he could get you to the promised land. All they need to do is build that team, and that is what they did this year in Anaheim. And the final reason why the Anaheim Ducks are going to make the playoffs, a team you have to watch out for, is because their division has gotten weak. The Pacific Division has collapsed on itself, and having a required 3 teams make the division, that is where Anaheim can shine. Understand that the Anaheim Ducks have a division where the Calgary Flames got worse. A division where the Edmonton Oilers, who are at the top of the castle right now, they're going to be locked in. But the second and third playoff team coming out of Pacific is pretty much a toss-up at this point. The LA Kings, they could get in it. The San Jose Sharks, you know what? In this weird situation, they might be able to do it. Seattle's gotten a bit better, but they are not there yet. Vancouver and Vegas are kind of on the same level right now. They've spent all this money. They've spent all this time getting talent, but they have one weakness that is setting them back. So with Vancouver and Vegas kind of being around the above average level, San Jose and Seattle being on the back end, and LA and Edmonton being the class of the Pacific Division, that means that you're going to have Anaheim, Calgary, Vancouver, and Vegas battling for that last spot in the playoffs. Understand that having the third and final locked spot in the Pacific Division team takes off. If Calgary could keep some of their momentum from last year, if Vancouver could build off of their hot streak in the second half of the year, or if Vegas could turn it around and keep some of the magic they had at the beginning of 2021. As a matter of fact, let me ask all of you watching around the world right now. If you have that one final spot in the division, and you got an up-and-coming Anaheim, a Calgary team who made it to the playoffs last year, you have a Vancouver team who was red hot in the second half of the year, and you have Vegas, who has spent the most money out of any team in the NHL, who's going to get that last spot? Who is going to be the third and final seed to come out of the Pacific in 2022? Because I've made an argument that Anaheim is going to be that team. That Edmonton's going to be 1, LA is going to be 2, and I say that Anaheim could be that third and final spot. And the Anaheim Ducks, with their youth movement, with their young talent, they could be the last spot to come out of the Pacific. And before anybody says why I'm saying the third and final spot, is because of how the NHL constructs their playoff format. The top 3 seeds in each division get locked in to the playoffs. The final 2 seeds are your wild cards. So I'm not saying that Vancouver and Vegas couldn't hypothetically be 7 and 8. I'm just saying that the Anaheim Ducks, I think, will be the 6th or 5th seed in the Western Conference. I say the Anaheim will lock up the third and final spot to guarantee a playoff bid for 2022. So Anaheim's done something pretty solid. And speaking of Anaheim, I talked about their goaltending. Well, goaltending needs to be addressed again. Because when it comes to goaltending, when it comes to starting goaltending, there was an article that was written recently that I kind of want to go over. There was an article written by Sportsnet talking about the worst and best goalies in the NHL. They were discussing who are the 5 worst starting goalies and who are the 5 best starting goalies. So, before I get into the worst, I'm actually going to discuss the best beforehand. Because I believe that talking about the best is actually a good way to start this out. So, at number 5, when it comes to the best goalie in the NHL, according to Sportsnet, the 5th best goalie in the NHL right now was actually a bit of a surprise for me. I'm actually going to be honest. I was actually really surprised that they ranked this guy so high as the 5th best goalie in the NHL, because not a lot of people give this guy credit, like, at all. Most people do not acknowledge that he is good at what he does. But number 5, they had Vancouver Canucks Thatcher Demko. San Diego, California native himself, Thatcher Demko, they have him as the 5th best goalie in the NHL. You know what? Thatcher Demko, his talent has been taking leaps and bounds from when he took over in the playoffs and took Vegas to a 7-game series, to having Vancouver rely on him at 26 years old. He has benefited and he has gotten better every single season. And at 26 years old, he is becoming a bona fide star. He is becoming an elite goaltender in the NHL. So Thatcher Demko at number 5 really shows you the amount of respect that this person who wrote the article is giving the Vancouver Canucks. At number 4, they have Calgary Flames Jacob Markstrom. And yes, I know Jacob Markstrom struggled in the playoffs. They even acknowledged that in the article, that Jacob Markstrom did have a very bad postseason. But what he did in 2021 is be reliable. He had a career year. Majority of his stats were his career best. He had a Vezina nomination. And he is also a guy who was the number 2 goalie in the NHL behind Igor Shesterkin, who I'll talk about later on. With Jacob Markstrom being a Vezina nominee, it makes sense that they have him at number 4. At number 3, they have Nashville Predators, Juuse Saros. And I have to agree that Saros at number 3, going from the Pekka Rinne era to the Juuse Saros era, was pretty much flawless. It pretty much was a smooth, like butter transition. So having 2 back-to-back years of Vezina votes, his 2021 campaign getting him the 3rd most votes out of any goalie in the NHL. He is one of the best in the NHL. He has actually been voted the best in the Western Conference, and this is also a guy who will probably get Vezina votes once again in 2022. So Juuse Saros at number 3 from Nashville, that makes a lot of sense. At number 2, they have the Vezina Trophy winner and Igor Shesterkin from the New York Rangers. And with him being the Vezina Trophy winner, it makes sense. It's very hard to say that a Vezina Trophy winner from the year before isn't a top 3 goalie in the league. I mean, I did this with Marc-Andre Fleury after he won the Vezina. They've done it with Andre Vasilevsky. They did it with Dominik Hasek. Like, trust me, when you win the Vezina, you are pretty much undisputed a top 2 goalie in the NHL heading into next year. So Igor Shesterkin at number 2, and then back-to-back Stanley Cup champion and a guy who went to 3 in a row, and that was Tampa Bay Lightning's Andre Vasilevsky. I mean, this guy is the number 1 goalie in the world. He has been a vital part of Tampa Bay going to a trio of Stanley Cup finals in a row. This is a guy who has been elite ever since 2019 and has been worth every single penny that Tampa Bay is paying him. Now, the 5 worst in the NHL is actually, I'm going to say, funny, because they have the 5 worst starting goalies in the NHL, and I actually disagree with one of them, but it's based off of technicality. I understand that I'm not saying that this guy isn't a bad goalie, but I'm going to use a technicality for one of the goalies they have on here. So at number 5 for the worst goalie in the NHL, they have the Chicago Blackhawks in Peter Mrazek. Now, Peter Mrazek, he came off a rough season in Toronto. He's been in Florida. He's been in Carolina. Look, he's been a journeyman in his career. Peter Mrazek came from a system in Toronto, came from a system in Florida. So him being the main guy in Chicago really shows you how downhill the Blackhawks have become. So Peter Mrazek at number 5, I don't disagree with that. That's pretty much self-explanatory. Number 4, the Seattle Kraken with Philip Grubauer. I mean, hey, how the mighty have fallen, folks. Philip Grubauer 2 years ago was receiving Vezina Trophy votes and led the Colorado Avalanche to the playoffs. 2 years later, he is voted as the 4th worst goalie in the NHL. And considering how bad he played in Seattle during their expansion year, I actually don't think that is a too far of a stretch. I mean, this guy had the worst campaign of his entire career. I mean, this guy went from Washington to Colorado to Seattle. So this guy had one of the worst showings in the NHL. His goals against average was terrible. His save percentage was terrible. And unless Seattle could turn it around soon, he might not even be in Seattle after a couple of years because of how bad Philip Grubauer was in year 1. Number 3, however, is who I actually am going to defend, but not for the reason you think. At number 3, they have Vegas Golden Knights, Laurent Brossoit. You heard that right, by the way. They have Laurent Brossoit as the 3rd worst starting goalie in the NHL. Now, where my technicality is going to come in and where my defense is going to be is that he is technically not the starting goaltender. Laurent Brossoit is not listed as the starting goaltender for the Vegas Golden Knights. He's currently injured. Robin Lehner is not the starting goaltender. He's injured. The newly acquired Aiden Hill from the San Jose Sharks. He is injured with lower body injury. He's not listed as starting goaltender. So with Logan Thompson, the 26-year-old coming from the Vegas Golden Knights, I am going to say on record that Logan Thompson last year was not a bottom 5 goalie in the NHL. Logan Thompson showed heart. Logan Thompson showed talent. Logan Thompson showed guts with Vegas. So Logan Thompson being a rookie entering his so-called rookie year in Las Vegas, I do not have him as a bottom 5 goalie in the NHL. So this article had Laurent Brossoit as the 3rd worst goalie in the NHL. I'm going to disagree with this because Brossoit is injured. Because Brossoit is not going to be the starting goalie, that's most likely going to be Logan Thompson with Michael Hutchinson backing him up. So for all Vegas Golden Knights fans who say that I do nothing but talk negative about them, well, how about you clip this to show that I actually do like the Vegas Golden Knights. I actually do respect the Vegas Golden Knights. And Logan Thompson is not a bottom 5 goalie in the NHL. Brossoit, I actually would agree. But Logan Thompson is not. So then number 2 on their list is Buffalo Sabres. And, you know, I want to be really nice here. I want to be very nice to Eric Comrie. But there's a reason why you were a backup in Winnipeg your entire career. You were the backup to Connor Hellebuck in Winnipeg for majority of your career. The reason why is because you were not starting goalie caliber. Understand that this guy had some excellent numbers in limited action in Winnipeg. This guy started maybe 15 games all year because Connor Hellebuck would play 60. Connor Hellebuck is a workhorse. Connor Hellebuck is a steel curtain in net for the Winnipeg Jets. So it's not shocking that Eric Comrie is second, considering his limited amount of playing time, his limited amount of starts in the NHL. And at number one, they have the 23-year-old Russian Ivan Prostov with the Arizona Coyotes. And I actually agree with this article's logic that because he's only played less than 15 games in his career, it would be difficult to rank a rookie goaltender at this point. So him being at number one is a default. It's not being negative to the guy, it's being honest. It's being honest that a 23-year-old Russian with less than 15 NHL starts is difficult to rank out of all 32 NHL goaltenders. So he is ranked last due to not a technicality, but he is ranked last due to the fact that we have not enough research. We have not enough of a statistical analysis on this guy. So to recap this article from Sportsnet, the 5 best goalies in the NHL. Number 1, Tampa Bay's Andrei Vasilevsky. Number 2, New York Islanders, Igor Shesterkin. Number 3, following New York Rangers, Igor Shesterkin, is Jose Soros for the Nashville Predators. Number 4, Calgary Flames, Jacob Markstrom. And number 5 is... It's live, folks. Anything can happen here on Sports Angle and PR Connections Radio, including me having a brain fart and forgetting exactly what I was going to say. Number 5, Vancouver Canucks, Thatcher Demko. So, yeah, the best starting 5 goalies in the NHL. Andrei Vasilevsky at 1, Igor Shesterkin at 2, having Jose Soros at 3, Jacob Markstrom at 4, and having Thatcher Demko at 5. And then the 5 worst starting goalies, according to Sportsnet. At number 5, you have the Chicago's Peter Mrazek. Number 4, Seattle's Philip Grubauer. Number 3, Vegas Golden Knights, Laurent Brossoit. Number 2, Buffalo Sabres, Eric Comrie. And number 1, Arizona Coyotes, Ivan Prostov. So we have about 10 minutes left here on the Sports Angle on PRConnectionsRadio.com, the voice of new media. And the Minnesota Wild are a team I want to dive into right now because the Minnesota Wild, they just traded Dmitry Kolkov to the Anaheim Ducks for future considerations. And the Minnesota Wild right now have a weird dilemma because they have enough of a roster to start 2022, but they have $5 million in cap space. Right now, the Minnesota Wild, they could make 2 or 3 signings if they chose to. If Bill Guerin really needed to add some more depth to the Minnesota Wild, he could pick up the phone and sign some veteran free agents to $750,000 deals. And considering who's available right now, you have guys like PK Subban, Anton Strowman, Calvin DeHaan. You have Victor Rask, who'd be familiar with Minnesota. And you have Jay Beagle, who has some teammates who've played alongside him in Minnesota. The Minnesota Wild could make some acquisitions. It's just, do they want to, is the biggest question. The Minnesota Wild could make some depth decisions to add to the forwards. It's just, if they feel like they need to, that is the biggest question. I am going to go for no, they have a pretty good team at the moment. Their top 6 in Minnesota is fantastic. Having Kirill Kaprizov, Ryan Hartman, Matt Zuccarello, that is a solid, one of the best top lines in the NHL today. On the second line, having Joel Eriksson Ek, Marcus Foligno, and having a young 25 in Brandon Duhaime, you have some solid competition on your top 6 and your middle 6 for the Minnesota Wild. And then when you keep going down, you have a young 21-year-old in Matthew Boldy, 23-year-old Connor Dewar, 20-year-old Marco Rossi, and you still have that 24-year-old Tyson Jost, who you got in the Colorado trade at the NHL trade deadline. So your bottom 6 is filled with youth and young talent. Your top 6, goal scorers, and guys who can get the puck in the back of the net. Your defense in Minnesota is one of the best in the NHL. You have Jared Spurgeon, Jonas Brodin, Matt Dumba. You have a veteran, Alex Goloski, who at 37 years old can still contribute in the NHL. As a matter of fact, him having a plus 41 last year was insane. And to top that all off, you have some young up-and-comers in Jacob Middleton and Kalen Addison to round out that defense. So the Minnesota Wild have built their defense. Their offense is secure. But what about their goaltending? What about the goaltending for the Minnesota Wild? Is it shaky? Is it uncertain? No, it's not. The Minnesota Wild have a Vezina Trophy winner in net. The Minnesota Wild have a guy who's going to be a future Hall of Famer in Marc-Andre Fleury. Marc-Andre Fleury, at age 37, signed a 2-year deal to stay in Minnesota. Marc-Andre Fleury, after having an abysmal tenure in Chicago, he is going to be going to Minnesota. He is going to have Philippe Gustafsson backing him up in Minnesota. And you have a solid tandem who will be able to help Minnesota get into the playoffs in 2022. The biggest question you have to ask about the Minnesota Wild is, are they going to keep the same status quo? Are the Minnesota Wild going to keep the one-and-done philosophy in Minnesota? It has been well established that the Minnesota Wild cannot get out of the first round. The Minnesota Wild, for some odd reason in the last decade, they make it to the show and then they bow out before the second round. Doesn't matter if it was against the Vegas Golden Knights in the pandemic-shortened season. Doesn't matter if it was in the playoff bubble in 2020 or if it was just a regular season like last year. The Minnesota Wild against St. Louis, they should have won that series, but they didn't. Because the Minnesota Wild have an unfortunate reality. They're not Colorado and they're not St. Louis. Colorado has won a Stanley Cup in the last 5 years. St. Louis has won a Stanley Cup in the last 5 years. Colorado has been to multiple conference finals the last couple of years. St. Louis Blues have made plenty of good trips in the conference finals the last couple of years. Understand that the Minnesota Wild have not accomplished this because they are not the best team in the Central. Based on how the NHL does their playoff seeding, majority of the time, you have the best in the Central and the best in the Pacific face in the Western Conference Finals. The way the NHL has that set up means that for Minnesota to make it to a conference final, for Minnesota to make it to the semifinals, they have to be the best or the second best in their division. And Minnesota consistently has not been that guy. Even when Colorado was on the back end and they were one of the worst teams in the NHL, you had the Nashville Predators who were being dominant. You had the Chicago Blackhawks with their dynasty being dominant. Minnesota Wild have been the little brother. They've been the middle child of the Central Division. While everybody who has the older brother is, kind of in the back end, sweeping up, getting ready for a rebuild. Then you got the little brother who is, being spoiled and cherished and winning championships and winning Stanley Cups. The Minnesota Wild are unfortunately the middle child of the Central Division. Most people don't give them any respect. Most people don't even care about them that often. And understand when it comes to Minnesota Wild, they do not have the talent majority of the time to go all the way in the Central Division. So my show is that the Minnesota Wild have the talent to make the playoffs, but they do not have the talent to be better than Colorado. They have the talent to be one of the top 3 teams in the Central Division, but they are not good enough to go up against a team like St. Louis. They're not good enough to go up against a team like Dallas from a couple of years ago, because the Minnesota Wild are the middle child of the Central Division. They are the redheaded stepchild of the Central Division. They're not Colorado. They're not Dallas. and they are not St. Louis or Winnipeg. They are what I like to call mediocrity. So, Minnesota Wild and Nashville Predators, welcome to what I like to call mediocrity, what I like to call the middle gray area of the NHL, because most people don't care about you, make the playoffs, and you get kicked out in the first round. It's unfortunate, but there has to be 2 or 3 teams who fit that description, and you fit that description perfectly well. So, this is a Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio, the voice of new media. Follow all the social medias at PR Connections Radio, and follow the show at Sports Angle on PR. Also, follow your host at Ian Rachele18. That is IANRACHIELE at 18. Also, go to our website, sportsangle.com, to read all the articles we have on there. And for speaking of articles, the Las Vegas Aviators, they're going to be doing the back end of their season, the final 2 series against Reno, and their final series going up in Tacoma. So the Las Vegas Aviators, they had a very good win against Reno recently. They are around 1 game in the 500. So the Las Vegas Aviators are doing good. Las Vegas Aces have beaten the Seattle Storm, tied up at 1 apiece. Let's hope they get to the WNBA Finals and take on the Chicago Sky. That'd be a fantastic WNBA Finals. And for the Las Vegas Raiders, mentioned them earlier in the show. I broke down their 53-man roster and gave my very brutal and very honest opinion about the Las Vegas Raiders. And the Vegas Golden Knights talked about their starting goaltending situation and why Logan Thompson is not one of the top 5 worst goalies that are starting right now in the NHL. So we had a fantastic show for you. We have episode 25 next week, so stay tuned for that. It's going to be an amazing show, doing a preview of the NFL Week 1. I'm going to have a guest come on, talk about the NFL. It's going to be an amazing show that you cannot miss. So episode 25 next week. 7 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Mountain, 9 p.m. Central, 10 p.m. Eastern, episode 25 of the Sports Angle on PR Connections Radio with your host, Ian Rachele. And until next time, I want to say to everybody, have a great weekend, have a great night, and, to all your family and your friends and everyone that you love, talk to them, love them, support them, and, have a great weekend, and until next time, stay safe.